Thank you, Marjorie. And it was great to listen to you, Alan, Leanne, and Kevin. And it's a privilege to talk about leadership in front of so many great, courageous leaders around the world. Leadership is not about headlines. We all know what they are. We all know about the rise in nationalism, polarization, misinformation, corruption, civil unrest. Leadership is about trend lines and having the courage to pass judgment on the future. It's about thinking deeply about the forces that are driving the world to where it wants to go and where it ought to go, and having the humility and the philosophical insights about the human condition to get all of this right. Stepping back, unprecedented and unfamiliar forces are not only rapidly changing the world, but they are dramatically reshaping our world. Our world operates differently. Powerful technological, social, environmental, and economic forces have brought us closer together and rendered us interdependent. Very few people can affect so many others so far away in ways they couldn't before. People's plights, hopes, dreams, frustrations are experienced directly and viscerally in tiny screens in our hands. Increasingly, we are interdependent because we rise and fall together. The moral philosopher David Hume argued that the moral imagination diminishes with distance. In our reshaped world, we're in a no-distance world. So our moral imagination has exploded. More people on more days see issues through the lens of good and bad, right and wrong, fair, unfair, just and unjust. And they go online and they broadcast their views to be met with others broadcasting their views. Spheres of society, the economy, and our lives that were once maintained as separate are now fused. Everything is personal, everything is human. Social, religious, geopolitical, environmental, human, and ethical issues that were once outside the business agenda are now inescapably central to the business agenda. In the fused world, the business of business can no longer be just business. The business of business must be and is now society. The global pandemic has only accelerated and intensified and revealed and amplified these forces and how they work and how they reshape the world. A tiny invisible pathogen has created the greatest leadership stress test at all levels in all sectors of society. And why do I say that? Because what started as a health crisis rapidly became a humanitarian crisis, and then an economic crisis, and an unprecedented unemployment crisis, a global supply chain crisis, revealing that so many supply chains were built for speed and efficiency and not resiliency and integrity. And also a moral crisis, because it confronts us with vexing issues and painful and profound dilemmas, even between saving lives and livelihoods, and laying bare deep truths, pervasive injustices and inequalities, both historic and modern day. When all of these crises combust simultaneously, we have a crisis of leadership and a crisis of authority. When so many people are scared and vulnerable and suffering, they naturally look to those in charge. They look to authority. They look to those in charge of institutions for leadership, to CEOs, to school principals, commanders in chiefs, prime ministers, presidents, governors, mayors, and also parents. They expect truthful answers, wise guidance, courageous action, and hope. All of this brings us to the urgent global leadership imperative of the 21st century. We all understand that you can't run a world, you can't have order or proper governance without positions of formal authority. But what really makes a world work is when individuals with formal authority and positions of formal authority are occupied by leaders with moral authority. Formal authority, as we know, can be seized. It can be won in elections. It can be bestowed. It can be locked up by an entrepreneur with supermajority shares. Formal leaders are really good at telling people what hill to climb, and they're good at getting them to do the next thing right. Moral authority is earned by who you are and how you lead. Moral leaders enlist people in journeys worthy of their dedication and loyalty, and they inspire them not to do the next thing right, but rather the next right thing. Moral leadership and building moral authority is not about moralizing. And it's more than activism, even though it does involve taking important positions on important issues. Moral leadership is about the how. How you wield power, not over people, but through people. How you gain your authority, not by your title, but by your behavior. How you relate to others, not one way, but two way, not coercively or motivationally, carrots and sticks, but rather inspirationally. To do all of this and to do it at scale, moral leaders build moral frameworks of shared purpose, sustainable, not situational, but sustainable values and ethical principles. And armed with these frameworks, moral leaders have the courage and conviction to highlight important nuance, to bring historical perspective, and to openly wrestle and navigate the gray. They do this by asking the right questions. What injustices are systemic and which are not? What misconduct is because of culture or just a bad apple? They also do this by asking challenging questions. Darren Walker, for example, the president of the Ford Foundation, recently asked the powerful and privileged among us, not what will you give back, but rather, what will you give up? And by asking this question, he opened pathways to reimagining a better path and a better future. These qualities are so critical to a healthy society that the president of Ireland, Michael Higgins, gave a national address calling for students to study philosophy so they too can develop the skills to think critically and thoughtfully. Moral leaders understand that outrage can either inspire or repress change. So they refrain from going directly from outrage to immediate demands without first having the necessary conversations so communities can come together to achieve real and lasting progress. They refuse to rely solely on cost-benefit analysis thinking. They make their decisions based on principle, however inconvenient or even unpopular. This helps them avoid doing the right things for the wrong reasons because they know that that doesn't scale because it does not enter the heart. They have the courage to see what others view as weaknesses, as strengths, compassion, empathy, love, and humility. Like when Bill Gates, who warned early on about the potential pandemic, still said that he could have done more. There's also Dr. Fauci, who so often says he doesn't know, so that people tend to listen to him when he does know. Above all, moral leaders see the full humanity in others. They don't see X's and O's or human resources or just talent, but people. They don't see consumers, but citizens. In this spirit, moral leaders are thus on a transformational journey away from shareholder primacy conception of capitalism towards a stakeholder conception of capitalism. And that's because they don't see stakeholders as means to shareholder ends, but as equal constituents, as people with hopes, dreams, aspirations, and concerns. In closing, leaders who pass this great leadership stress test will be those who use the pandemic not just for admirable humanitarian assistance, but to strengthen or transform their organizations as fully human endeavors. They will put humanity at the center of all decisions and actions. In a post-pandemic world, moral leaders know that we will have been forever changed. Our expectations are forever going higher. In a post-pandemic world, they won't go back to selling. They will take the qualities they manifested in crisis, sacrifice, empathy, and compassion, and pivot away from saving towards serving. In this regard, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals taken as a whole serve as a powerful framework for what we need to do. And Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions, is the how. It's the how we will get there. But I'd like to say we must no longer see it as a goal. Goal 16 cannot be a goal. It has to be our urgent imperative. It animates everything else. Finally, moral leaders understand that the true antidote to fear in times that cause us so much fear is hope, not optimism. Moral leaders are purveyors of hope. They help us see hope even in the struggle. And with hope, we see possibility for a reimagined and better future. My greatest hope is that not too far in the future, this form of moral leadership will no longer require courage because it will be everywhere. It will occupy countless spheres and countless realms of both business and society. Thank you for the opportunity to address you.